Hey everyone, I just wanted to separate this section into a completely different video because while recording my review of the chapter, this really got long-winded and I personally thought really interesting because I felt as though this was definitely worthy enough to be its own video in its entirety. I didn't think Oda would drop any more bombs besides possibly more about the Goma Goma no Mi, but he just does it again. Who's Who is really just an info dump that I love every second of. And with that, I hope you enjoy my ramblings about his new info. At this point, I'm just going to ramble my thoughts off right now because there's a lot going through my head. So, Who's Who was arrested 12 years ago in Impel Down, and he was told this legend about the sun god. This character's name is Nika, and he is portrayed as this being who is able to free those who are persecuted against and bring laughter and joy to them. And I feel as though this is really interesting because the first time this is ever mentioned in the entire story is in Skypia's Calgara flashback, where we get to see the Shandarans worshipping this sun god. So, when Who's Who said there's this ancient figure that the slaves would pray for, we already know this ancient figure in the story. I just think it's really interesting that the two main aspects of godlyhood, which is Enel from Skypiea and the Celestial Dragons, have this idea of the sun god who is able to free the people, with Skypiea having the sun god be this form of innocence with the Shandarans trying to make sure that they will be free in the afterlife, and for the slaves in Marie-Joie trying to hold onto this hope that he will eventually free them. I thought this was a really interesting point to bring up because this actually gives an origin story as to why Fisher Tiger wanted to call the Sun Pirates the Sun Pirates. Back to my point about Skypiea though, the main reason that I feel this connection is so evidently strong is the posture that this Nika sun god is portrayed in, because as one of the most literally iconic scenes of the entire series, I noticed basically instantly that Luffy from the campfire scene in Skypiea is in basically the exact same posture, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Nika is described as someone who can bring laughter and joy, and Robin throughout the first time in the entire series finally feels comfortable with the crew in that scene. Luffy is meant to be directly representative as this savior of Skypiea, as a god that people pray to save them from Enel, and Luffy also brings laughter to people who have felt persecuted and uncomfortable. This connection has to mean something, and if it literally, you know what, it's not even an and if it literally doesn't, it does mean something. This is a direct correlation to Luffy, but the main question is, how on earth did the slaves in Marie-Joie learn about this god from Skypiea? The truth of the matter is, it's actually not from Skypiea at all. It's actually from the ancient Shandarans who were on the Blue Sea, which is the Earth, meaning that Oda introduces this fictional godlike character in a place that seems like heaven. This gives the reader the impression that this god is not a real person, or it could just be another person with a devil fruit just like Enel. However, since Shandara is on the Blue Sea, we know that this Nika character is in fact a real person that did indeed exist. Who's Who brings up, who knows if he even really existed, but obviously with the amount of parallels that this character has been given to Luffy, I think it is absolutely certain that this character did indeed exist, and that this character personally reminds me a lot of when Rox was introduced into the story. Rox was meant to be this person of great darkness and destruction, and instantly we all thought that he was a lot similar to Blackbeard. This Nika character absolutely reminds me of Luffy to a T, and we haven't even heard anything about him. We just know that Nika is this ancient figure from the past, and personally, I think that Oda is setting up this parallel very well by having him shrouded in mystery, yet in believability and a positive aura surrounding him. It actually reminds me a lot of the way that Rox was introduced, because Rox, even though he was a figure in the present day, he was erased from history by the Celestial Dragons. And I think it's pretty interesting that the person who was talked to about freeing the slaves and being a positive person, the person who told Who's Who about that legend, was erased and vanished, possibly due to the Celestial Dragons themselves. Along that train of thought, I really wanted to discuss something I found interesting from the Kalgara and Nolan flashback, which takes place 400 years ago from the present day. We see that the Shandarins believe that the Sun God Nika is actually this sort of sacrificial deity where you have to kill someone in order to gain their positive graces. I think that this is possibly a kind of reinterpretation that was caused by the celestial dragons themselves, because obviously they came into power 800 years ago during the Void Century. I think this could be very similar in attitude to real life religions, where they are reinterpreted by those who become into power. For example, one of the most prominent ones was the Spanish Inquisition, which had the removal of all of Islamic beliefs from Spain and had them replaced with Christianity, and had the people who were persecuted because of this religion removed forcefully. I think that this Nika religious figure could have been reinterpreted to become this negative sacrificial deity where you have to pay something in order to gain their graces. This could also explain why the people of Skypiea were so tolerant of Enel's kind of tyranny. They knew he was a fearful being, but he was their god. He had to be someone of great power that they had to believe in and honestly fear, and he thrived off of that fear himself and embraced the title. Honestly, due to this connection, I'm very intrigued about Enel's return eventually to the story. Perhaps Enel will also learn about this sun god figure and possibly change his ways in some way. He might have learned all this knowledge while he was on the moon during his cover story, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential here with this because of its strong relations to Skypiea. Another thought process I had while looking at it from the idea of erasing or altering history was the idea of Emu existing. I feel as though possibly, especially since he is portrayed as a sun god, the fact that the Gorosei are saying that a light has to be extinguished, I feel as though there must be some relation between the Gorosei Emu and this Nika figure, because obviously the only people who seem to know about it are slaves or prisoners, and they've been around in these walls of persecution from the celestial dragons for hundreds and hundreds of years now. So I feel as though this tall tale of this figure must have spread throughout ever since they first came into power, and they were believing in this guy to save them. However, the celestial dragons possibly could have erased him from history. Now, the most obvious point that I haven't brought up yet is the connection that the two have, Luffy and Nika, they have to lights. Nika is portrayed as a sun god. Many people have been influenced by him using sun imagery in order to represent joy and prosperity and just moving forward with a positive outlook in general. Now, Luffy has always been portrayed as the man who will bring the dawn of the world. Many people have considered him to be this figure like Pedro, like not Roger himself. Roger knew that figure would come later, like Odin. Many people know that this figure will come in the future. I think that having this connection just specifically with light and positivity and bringing forth a new dawn is really interesting. Perhaps Nika could have been the figure that was positive before in the Void Century, while the celestial dragons took over and took them down. Now, what I think about with Luffy in relation to this figure is the way they are portrayed once again. I mentioned this earlier that they were in the same posture, but I think it is very essential that they're both completely silhouetted as well. I feel like if Luffy was not silhouetted, this would be noticeable, but not as blatantly so. Oda is definitely trying to push this connection because of both of these panels being silhouetted. Now, what I believe will happen in the future, I am uncertain. I think having some knowledge revealed about this character in a poneglyph would be really, really fascinating, because from literally just a single panel, I am so beyond fascinated with this character. I just want to know so much about them and their relation to the world itself. Because the fact we're being told about this from a Cypher Pole agent, I feel like it has to mean something essential. Because who's who? At this point in the story, he's only been spouting information for 2 chapters now, but he's been dropping bomb after bomb of information. And literally at the start of the chapter, Cypherpole was saying how his information would be outdated and how it wouldn't really be important for him to tell us this information. But clearly, this information changes everything. All in all, this furthers the point from most of the people in the fan base that Skypiea is One Piece itself, down to its essential core, and this is becoming much more relevant now. I believe that at this point in the story, people who have skipped or skimmed over most of Skypiea, you need to reread it. It is absolutely insane how much of that part of the story is coming back right now with literally just this single reveal. The amount of inherited will happening right now, I think this Nika character is almost on the same level, if not more, than Roger and Joy Boy. Luffy is meant to be the person who will bring the dawn to the world, and I think the fact that he has such relation to someone from the ancient past, literally considered the Sun God, is no coincidence at all. Now, reread Skypiea, and with that, hope you enjoyed the video.